The room with a stuffed bear. The man sat in a dark room, silent. The lights came on. The man blinked as his eyes adjusted. He looked around. The room seemed empty, making the room seem much larger than it really was. The walls were covered in white sheets. Across from where the man was sitting was a white teddy bear, sitting in a chair. The man rose from his chair and walked around the room, searching for an exit. No luck. The man sat back down and looked across at the stuffed animal. He chuckled. Crazy how things turn out, huh? The last thing I remember was that I was out partying with one of the guys, and now I'm locked up in here. And now I'm talking to an inanimate object, like a moron. The man looked around at the ground, rubbing his hands together. He stopped as if realizing something. He searched his pockets, empty. He let out another chuckle. This one much more uncertain than the last. His hands began to tremble. Oh God, I'm going to die in here. The room was still for about 2 minutes before the man suddenly stood up and began shouting. Help! Can anyone hear me? Help! He began to look around the room, still shouting. His useless words echoed around the room. His voice started to tremble. He slowly sat back down and began to cry. The man had been crying for almost 20 minutes before he finally stopped. His eyes darted to the ground. Gonna die in here. 2 hours passed. The room was silent. The man was still looking at the ground, and he suddenly looked up at the stuffed bear. He tilted his head as the bear began to mumble something. He stopped after 5 minutes and continued to stare at the floor once again. 2 more hours passed. The man began to pace around the room, muttering something to himself. He suddenly stopped and shifted his eyes towards the bear. Stop laughing. The man continued to pace for about 20 more minutes, returning to his chair. 1 hour passed. The man had been looking around the floor as his head shot up. Stop that, he murmured at the bear. He stood up. I said stop! He stood still for a minute before sitting back down. The man began to sing to himself. His voice was drenched with uncertainty. His fingers were constantly moving. His eyes seemed to twitch every once in a while. He stopped singing and looked up at the bear. Shut up! 30 minutes passed. The man sat quietly in the chair, his hands in his lap, staring at the lights above him. He slowly lowered his head. I thought I told you to stop. He stared at the bear's beady eyes. I told you to stop. The man stood up and walked over to the chair that the bear sat upon. Stop! Anger covered the man's face. The man started to back up. No, I said stop it now. Fear replacing his anger. The man grabbed his chair and threw it at the bear. Stop it now! The chair knocked the bear off its seat. The man grew silent. The man took a step toward the bear and began to scream. He grasped his head as his mouth seemed to open more than it had ever before. He began to tear the hair out of his head as he dropped to his knees. I'm sorry. He was on the ground, his eyes tightly closed and his hands covering his ears. Please stop. Please make it stop. The man's body began to jerk around. The man turned his head and opened his eyes, directed them at the bear. Please, make it stop. The man jerking 2 days later, the police found the man dead in the empty room. The supposed cause of death was a heart attack. The bear was confiscated as evidence and will be brought to a forensics lab. There, the screaming will start again.